cycle. We want to look at information processing cycle. This topic is the first topic in the old GES, as in the Ghana Education Service syllabus, ICT to be precise. ICT to be precise, that is the 2007 based edition. The first topic in the old GES, as in Ghana Education Service syllabus, 2007, the first topic to be precise. So we want to look at information processing cycle, IPC. So quickly, let's start. Now, before we continue with information processing cycle, let's look at some keywords: data, and then data and information. When we are talking about data is just a raw fact or a raw material that is not meaningful to the user. Okay, so data is what this is a raw facts or material that is not meaningful, to the user. Okay, someone can also say that what a raw fact or unorganized figures which are not meaningful to the recipient or the user, or something that is meaningless. Okay, so when we are talking about data, it's just anything that is what meaningless. That is data. It's a raw fact, raw figures that is not useful. Okay, for instance, when you are given let me give this example. For example, when you are given this figure, let's say 2x plus 2, okay, let me say 2 plus y equals 6. So this is not meaningful. There is a data which needs to go through a process to be meaningful. So this becomes a data. All right, we can have several examples of it. For instance, another example is you want to prepare soup, or the raw facts, the raw ingredients that you've got in your genie, that your onion, your pepper, your Maggi cube, your salt. These things are in their raw state, and you can't use them raw, like you can eat them raw like that. So it becomes data. It's not meaningful, it's meaningless. Okay, so that is data. Now the next thing is information. What then is information? Information is a processed data. Okay, information is what? A processed data which is, or that is meaningful, to the user. So this means that when a data is processed, when a data is processed, the result of that becomes what? Information. So the example I gave earlier, as in the 2 plus y equals 6. So when this is processed, you end up having something like y equal 6, right, minus, because when positive 2 crossing the negative, going to the other side of the symbol becomes what? Minus 2. So then y here becomes what? 4. So this is now information, because we now understand that anywhere you see y, it should give you what? 4. So another way to do this is when you subtract 2 from both sides. At this stage, you subtract 2 from both sides. So that is it. So this has become information because this is meaningful. So using the salt, your onion, your pepper, your those things as whatever, when you process it and you get your soup or your stew, then you have your stew or your soup become information, because there the truth will be eager to enjoy, or the math will be eager to what? Enjoy. So this is data. This is data, something in its raw stage, which is not meaningful. It's meaningless. That is data. Data is always meaningless, and then information is always meaningful because it's a result generated after processing something. Okay, so with us understanding data and information, let's look at IPC, that is the information processing cycle. So let's look at the information processing cycle. What is the information processing cycle is talking about? A series of stages where data goes through to becomes what? Information. So when we are talking about information processing cycle, is what? A series of stages where data goes through to become what? To become information. So let's look at this. Let's go back to our information again, the keywords. Now when you check this, we have a series of stage. So you have stage 1 here and then stage 2. This series of stage where the data goes through to become information, that stage is what we call information processing cycle. A series of stages that data goes through. If you don't want to use series of stages, you can say sequence. Okay, sequence talking about systematic way of doing something. Sequence or steps. That's the friend is saying steps where data goes through to becomes what? Information. That is what we call the information processing cycle. That is what we call the information processing what? Cycle. Now the next thing I want us to look at what? Stages of the information processing cycle. Stages of the information processing cycle. Now we have there are about 5 main stages of the information processing cycle. Okay, there are 5 main stages of the 5 main stages of the information processing cycle. Now out of these 5 stages, I call 3 of them the golden stage, because out of that 3 we have data becomes what? Information. Okay, so let's look at the stages one after the other. Let's look at this stages one after the other. So these stages are 1, we have the input stage. Okay, then the second one is what? Processing stage. We have the processing stage, we have the output stage, we have the storage, stage, and then we have the distribution stage. So these are the 5 stages of the information processing cycle. Now out of these 5 stages, these three stages here, I call it the golden stage. These 3 stages here, I call it the golden stage. Why do I call it golden stage? Because with these stages, with these 3 stages, we don't have what? Data again, but we have what we call information. With these 3 stages, we don't have what we call data again, but rather we have what I normally refers to as information. So that is our golden golden stage. Is it clear? This is what I call the golden stage, because as at this stage we don't have data, but we have information. That is the main thing that happens. The rest becomes secondary, as in the rest become choices, whether to save it or to keep it or to distribute it. But you know, in using the computer, usually we have to keep things for future reference. Is it clear? So these are the 5 main stages of, or the 5 stages of the information processing cycle, and I have the golden stage, where by the end of the third stage we don't have what a data, but we have what we call information. So for instance, let's go back to the keyword. Now you see that this is the data here. Now this data has been inputted into a device, let's say a calculator, and then it has been processed. Then it gave us what? A result. So we have these 3 stages here. So we can say that what this one is now telling us that it's at the input stage here. So you see this at the input stage here. Then over here we may say we have it at the at the processing stage. Then this give us the output stage. So somebody can say we have 3 main stages of the information processing cycle. It's also not bad. For me, it's correct when somebody says that we have 3 main stages of the information processing cycle, but in general we have 5. So in general we have what? 5 main stages. Is it clear? In general, I may say we have 5 main stages of the information processing cycle. Now let's look at what happens at each level of the stage. What happens at each level of this wonderful stage? Each level, what actually happens there? Let's look at that. All right, now the input stage, we are taking the input stage first. So let's look at the input stage. What actually happened? The input stage here is the very first stage of the information processing cycle, and this is the stage where data is captured or fed into the computer system. So the input stage is the very first stage of the information processing cycle. Okay, so this is a stage. This is a stage whereby data or input, if you don't want to say data, you can say inputs or input is captured. Okay, is captured or fed or entered into the computer system for processing. Captured into the computer system for processing. So that is our input stage. So let's assume you are using a calculator. All right, we are assuming you are using a calculator. So when you take your calculator and you are punching digits, okay, you are punching digits from the keyboard onto the calculator. The process of punching is what we call the input stage level. Okay, when you are punching your keys on either on your computer or on your calculator, the process of you punching or pressing the keys, that stage becomes the input stage. Okay, then before you press your equal sign, then processing is taking place, then your result is being displayed. Is it clear? Now let's look at some devices that we use at the input stage level. What are some of the devices that we use at the input stage level? At the input stage level, the devices that allows us to communicate with the computer system, as in to feed data into the computer system, or to give the computer instruction, or to command the computer to do something. Those devices becomes what? Input device. Examples of input device, we are talking about the keyboard, the computer mouse, joystick, microphone, touchpad. All these devices fall within examples of input device. Okay, these devices allows us to feed the computer with data, allow us to command the computer, allows us to issue the computer with instructions. Exactly. So the input stage is a stage whereby information is whereby data, not information, whereby data is fed or entered into the computer system for processing. Now let's look at the second stage. Remember, the input stage is the first stage of the information processing cycle. So let's look at the second stage, which is the processing stage. Okay, so the processing stage here, the processing stage is actually the second stage of the information processing cycle. Okay, now this is a stage whereby data is transformed, or changed, or converted into information, So you see, at the input stage level, data is fed into the computer, and at the processing stage level, the data that which is fed into the computer is converted or transformed, or is changed into information. So a lot of transformation always take place, or calculations take place at the processing stage, because this is the stage where data which has been fed into the computer for processing is actually transformed or converted or changed into information. Remember, if today is the first time you are coming to this channel, please subscribe so that we can learn. This is the Learn Hub, a platform where we learn tech related things and other stuff. Now let's come back to business. Now let's look at some devices that enable us to enable the transformation to take place. This is where actually the computer transforms the data into information. Okay, in the computer system, the main device that allows the transformation or the converting of data into information to take place is the CPU. Okay, the CPU, that is the central processing unit. The CPU, that is the main device that carries out these instructions that transforms the data into information. Okay, and that is the second part of the second stage of the information processing cycle. Now we will continue with the next stage, which is the output stage. The output stage, what do we say? The output stage is the third stage of the information processing cycle, is the output stage. Okay, this is a stage whereby information is displayed or given out, is displayed or given out to the user. All right, is displayed or given out to the user. The third stage of the information processing cycle, we said, is what? The output stage. Remember we said after what? After a processing stage, we don't have data again, but we have the output stage. Remember that we said after the processing stage we don't have data again, but what we have is what? The output stage, a stage where information, a stage where information is displayed to the user, a stage where information is what? Displayed. Is it clear? A stage where information is actually displayed. So when you check this, we have our input stage, processing stage, and then processing stage and output stage. That is where information is displayed. Information, let me add, is displayed or generated to the user. Okay, so that is why at times we call this the golden stage, because as at that stage you don't have data again, but you have what we call information. Is it clear? Now let's look at some devices that is responsible for this stage. The devices that display information to the user or give a generated result to the user. These devices allows the computer system to interact with the user or to communicate back or give feedback to the user. These devices, we call them output devices. Some people will say output peripherals. Okay, it's not bad, it's correct, but we call them output devices. The output devices, we have the basic one, we have the monitor, we have the projector, we have the printer, and others. Okay, these are some examples of output devices that display information to the user. These devices generally display information to the user. Now, after the golden stage, which is the three main stages of the information processing cycle, we also have a stage where we call the storage stage. We have the storage stage. After those stages, the next stage, which is the storage stage. Remember, the storage stage is the fifth stage of the information processing cycle. So let me number my stages, okay, so that we could be in line. So the second stage, processing stage, the third stage, output stage, and then the fourth stage is what? The storage stage. The fourth stage is the storage stage. So what do we say as the storage stage? What actually happens over there? What do we do over there? Now, the storage stage is a stage whereby a generated result or a generated result, which is information, is actually kept for future reference. Okay, so the storage stage is the fifth stage of the information. The fifth stage. The storage stage is the fifth stage of the information processing cycle. Okay, this stage is where information is kept. Okay, that information could be the generated result. Okay, the generated result or information is kept for future reference or used. Okay, all the devices that allows us to keep information for future reference, we call them storage device. storage device. These are devices that allows us to keep information for future reference or use. Is it clear? So if you don't want to put reference, you can say or use it. Perfectly correct. So that is the fourth stage of the information processing cycle, which is basically the storage stage. The fourth stage, basically the storage stage, a stage where information is kept for future reference. Remember, after the processing stage, we don't have data again. All that we have is what? Information. All right, so the fifth stage, to be precise, the fifth stage is distribution stage. Okay, the fifth stage is distribution stage. What do we say the distribution stage is? The distribution stage is a stage whereby information is shared or given out to potential users. A stage whereby information is given out to potential users. So the last stage of the information processing cycle is the distribution stage. So the distribution stage, the distribution stage is the stage whereby information is given to potential users or people who need it. Why is it potential users? Because there are certain informations people don't need it. For instance, what I'm doing over here, this tutorial or this lesson that is going on here, you need it. That is why you are watching it. So you are the one who needs this very information, so you try to get access to it, so you become a potential user. But those who don't need it, don't try to get access to it. There are various medium or means or ways which information is being distributed or is being shared or is being given out. One is the use of the internet by sending email, putting it on blogs or vlogs, as in YouTube. People go in there to access it, creating a website, practicing podcast. You see, practicing podcast, creating chat rooms, online collaborations. You see, these are various ways or means by which information is what shared or distributed. Okay, so that is the various stages of the information processing cycle. Now one thing you are to understand about the information processing cycle is it's called a cycle because it's a continuous something. It's a continuous something. You get to understand the stages very well when we look at when we represent the information processing cycle in a diagram form. So let's do that. The diagram, let's represent the information processing cycle in a diagram form. So representing okay, so let me put it this way, using a diagram to represent the information processing cycle. Okay, using a diagram to represent the information processing cycle. So how do we do that? How do we represent the information processing cycle with the diagram? And during the explanation, you get to understand why information never ends and data never ends. Is it clear? So let me just pick a very nice box here. Okay, so this box, I think the background color, let me outline. No, this is a test color, so let me put it black. So let me go in there, change the background color a little bit to look more presentable. Okay, then let me copy this, paste it. I think it's cool. Copy paste. I need about 5 of this. Yes, then copy paste. This is 4. I need about 5. Okay, then copy and then paste. Okay, all right, so okay, now this very first one here becomes, but before I complete it, let me just put in one or two things. Yeah, okay, just getting something to make it look more all right, so I think so. Copy this arrow here, bring it here, then you rotate it to switch the events. Yes, then close it small. It's not the best tool I pick. I think this is not the best tool I pick, but just bear with me. Yeah, this is not the best tool I pick. This is not the best tool I pick, but just bear with me. Let's just do it quickly, not to waste time. I think, let me check if I can get better tool. Okay, I think let me just pick a normal arrow for that. Okay, I think normal arrow will help. I think normal arrow will help than this. Okay, this is a normal arrow. Okay, so I think this one is cool. All right, so normal arrows will do the work. Then just rotate it. Get it a little bit long. Yes, okay. All right, so I can bring this a little bit close here, and then bring this a little bit close, then rotate this one like this a little bit. Yeah, okay, I think it's cool. Then because this is already here, then we just rotate it. Okay, then copy paste, then this. All right, so we are done with our diagram. Okay, this is our diagram. Let's represent the necessary information into the diagram. Now the first thing here is our text box here. Then we have the input stage. Okay, so this is our input stage. Now the text color should be black, and then bold it, make it a little more visible. So our input stage, I'll be explaining it. Then our processing stage. we have our processing stage. Okay, then processing stage. Okay, then after our processing stage, we have our storage stage. Okay, our storage stage, sorry, our output stage, not storage, our output stage. Then after the output stage, we have the storage stage here. Okay, storage, our storage stage, our storage stage, then our distribution stage. What actually happens at the distribution stage? You explain everything. So distribution stage. So this is the information processing cycle, which has been presented in a diagram form. Okay, now when data is fed or data is entered into the computer, that data is processed. Okay, that data is processed, and once it is processed, it gives us what? Output. It gives us output, then the output is being stored. When the output is stored, at this stage you keep that information because you need it in the future. Is it clear? Or you want to share it, you want to distribute it. When that information is distributed or is given out to potential users, they also go in there and then start entering it into their system. For instance, we went to a program and then they gave us a hard copy of some documents, and then the documents I want to keep them. Then I have to start typing that document or scanning the document so that I will have a soft copy of it. Exactly. So that is how the information processing cycle works. Somebody's information is another person's data. So for instance, I am giving you this and then you are listening to it. So to me, I'm giving you information. To you you are receiving a data because you are going to process it to find out whether this information I'm giving you is the correct one. Then after processing it, when you get your result, you keep it, and then you also pass it on to somebody. So that is how the whole system works. That's information processing cycle. Good. So if there is any question, you can put it under the comments box or the comments below there. I'll read them and answer them. Now the next thing, so that is the diagram representing the information processing cycle. Remember the arrow, the movement of the arrow is very, very important. Now the next thing we want to look at is how the computer transforms data into information. How the computer transforms data into information. That is the next thing I want us to look at. So if there is any question you want to ask, if there is anything you feel like I should attend to before we continue with this, feel free and then leave the comments down there. I'll read it and then reply you. Okay, ask questions if there is something you don't understand. So how the computer actually transforms data into information is what I want us to look at. The computer transforms data into information by first accepting input from the keyboard or the mouse. Okay, the computer first accepts data from the user, through the keyboard, or accepting input from the keyboard or the mouse. Now the keyboard actually does the conversion. Okay, it converts a human language into a machine language or a computer language. You know, computer deal with its own language, and that language we normally call it a machine language or a binary language or computer language. Many people call it, many tech service call it different ways. As I said, some people call it machine language, binary language, or computer language. It's all talking about the same thing. Is it clear? So the computer first accepts input from the keyboard. These inputs are entered by users, and the keyboard converts this input into a binary language or a binary what code or a computer language. Now when this input is entered, the computer have the CPU working on it. Okay, so the CPU actually process this input from the user, which has been the CPU actually process this input from the keyboard and then display it to the user using the various output devices, which also convert it, give it to the output device, which the output device also converts it back to human language for us to understand. For instance, what I'm doing right now, I'm seated with the computer. Okay, anytime I punch a key on the keyboard converts that key into a machine language or a computer language. Now this key which has been converted into a computer language, usually zeros and ones, okay, this keys goes to the CPU, and the CPU, by the help of the arithmetic logic unit, does calculations on this input and then send it back to, using the control unit, does the directions and the regulations. Okay, then it sends it back to the monitor, then the monitor also converts it back to a language that we understand, we humans, the life words, understand in. So this is all that happens. So let's come back to my friend is saying my golden age. Sorry, I mean, say golden age, my golden rules or my golden steps. You see this, all these things happen, this three things happens here. Input stage, that is the input of data, then the keyboard converts this data into a machine language, then it is processed. The CPU does the processing depending on the speed, depending of the speed of your CPU. The process is carried out quickly, somewhere milliseconds. Okay, very fast, as I said, depending on the speed of your CPU. This data is quickly converted or worked on or processed, and then the result is given, or the control units direct the result, and the monitor converts it back to a language that we understand. So I'm working on this project. The keyboard is converting my inputs into a machine language. The monitor is converting a result from machine language into a user-friendly language, a language that I understand. That is why I can equally see things here and read. But actually what happens in the system is the calculation, which is carried out by the CPU. Okay, so the CPU, this is what actually happens in the CPU. I will draw the CPU here. We quickly analyze what actually transpired or take place in the CPU. So the CPU just looks like this. Okay, many of us who have seen the CPU physically before, I'm giving you the components of I'm actually giving you the components of the CPU. Okay, so the CPU, actually this is how it is. This is how the CPU is, and then let me increase the outline small so that things will be visible. Okay, and the color is black, and then okay, then outline 3. 3 points, and then the color is black. Okay, so in here I have what is called ALU. All right, someone will ask me, what is ALU? ALU is arithmetic logic unit. ALU is arithmetic logic unit. Okay, ALU is arithmetic logic unit. Then we have the Q. Q is the control unit. Q is control unit, and then after the control unit we have what we call the register. The register, many people call it memory. So register, yes, register or memory. This is what actually happens in the system. So register or memory, as I said, many people call it memory. Now let me explain this diagram. So this is the component. This is actually the component of the CPU. So I prefer, let me just put this in a group and then pick it to the other page so that it will be on a page alone, so that it can be on a page alone for better naming. Okay, so let me just pick this. Wow, I've actually not grouped the other one, so sorry. So group this. Okay, so cut it. Now let me add one page for this, and then let me take this out and let me name this component of the CPU. That is the central processing unit. Okay, that is the central processing unit. CPU stands for central processing unit. So this is what actually happens in there. Now when data goes, when you punch in data, okay, the data is, when you punch in data as in you type or you entered anything command from your keyboard or your input device, it goes to the register. The register keeps it or hold it temporarily. Okay, then the CPU or the control unit, sorry, me na miss CPU, sorry, the control unit, which is the CU, regulate or direct the inflow and outflow of data. That's in data coming in there and data going out there. So once the CPU is directing the inflow and the outflow of data coming from the keyboard and onto, and coming from the keyboard and going out from the CPU or the register, the control unit only does calculations. Okay, the ALU, the arithmetic logic unit, only does logical operations, as in summing up, working logically, arithmetically, working on those codes or those binary codes, zeros and ones. Those binary codes, as in the zeros, okay, the zeros and the ones. Okay, the zeros and the ones. So when you enter something, when you type something, the keyboard converts that thing into a machine language, and the machine language is the binary language, which are zeros and ones. Okay, these zeros and ones is registered into, or is kept into the register, or is registered, which many people call the memory. It's a temporal storage device that holds data. Then the ALU, the arithmetic logic unit, does the calculation. Okay, as in summing up things, putting things together, and then adding things. Is it clear? It does the calculation quickly. For instance, let me give you an example. 1 character on the keyboard is a byte. 1 character on the keyboard is a byte, and the byte is 8 bits. A byte is what? 8 bits, which means that 8 of this so 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, let's say 8. So 8 of this gives us what? A byte, which is equivalent to 1 character on the keyboard. So let's do something. So let's assume this 0 and then so there is a little bit different here. So let's assume this is what M, this is equivalent to what M. We are not saying that, I'm not saying it's exactly M, but we are assuming this is equivalent to M, and then this is also equivalent to what A. Okay, let me use this is also equivalent to, let's say, I, and then this is equivalent to S. So, and you want to type is. Okay, so since you want to type is, then this is what you see by the end of the day. So this is, you want to type is, so this is what you are going to see by the end of the day. So in the CPU, when calculation is done, this is what the CPU gets to know, or this is what the CPU see. But at your end, you have your is like this. By the end, you have your is like this because of the output device. Exactly, because of the output device. So this is actually the binary thing, or the calculations that happens in the CPU. So the control unit, which is the CU, controls or directs or regulates the inflow and the outflow of what figures or data going in there. That is the binary codes. And then the arithmetic logic unit, which is the ALU, does the arithmetic logical calculations on that piece of digits in there. So that is actually what actually happens in the CPU. So now the next thing, we are looking at how the computer transforms data into information. So the computer first accepts what? The computer first accepts input from the keyboard, input from the, let's say, from the user, input from the user using maybe the keyboard. Okay, maybe the keyboard. This input is converted. This input is converted into a machine language. A machine language for the processing device. For the processing device, which is the CPU. Okay, for the processing device, which is the CPU, to understand, which means that the CPU or the processor in the system only understands a machine language. Is it clear? The CPU only understands a machine language. So when it happens like that, the keyboard converts the input into a machine language for the processing device, which is the CPU, to understand. Is it clear? Now the CPU then transforms. The CPU transforms this piece of input, this piece of what? This piece of input, the CPU then transforms or works on this piece of input, which is then sent, which is input, which is then sent, which is then directed back to, which is then directed back, which is then directed to the output, which is then directed back, which is then directed to the output device, which is then directed back to output device. Okay, output device, not display, output device, and the output device and the output device converts, and the output device converts this output into a readable. The output device then converts this final results, or output into a readable format, for the user to read and understand. So this is actually what happens in the system. So you realize that in there you have your input stage, then you have your processing stage where the CPU then transforms or works on this piece of input, which is then directed to the output device, so the output stage. So the golden stage is still accomplished over here. So this is actually how the computer transforms data into information. Thank you very much for watching. In case of any question or in case you don't understand anything, feel free to express your views or ask questions, or maybe there is something you want to add to it. Please feel free to add it. I would love to learn from you, and I would love to enrich my knowledge from whatever you guys are going to be added to it. I'm very much grateful. I'm very much grateful to this lesson, and once again, thank you very much once again. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for everything. Thank you. Goodbye. Please subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe. Please don't forget to subscribe. It's very important. Don't forget to subscribe. Very important. So once again, thank you very much. Bye. It's Maxan. Sorry, it's Learn Hub. We learn. We'll meet again. Learn Hub. This platform. It's Learn Hub where we learn. The only thing too is we learn. We acquire knowledge from different fields. We learn. We acquire knowledge from different fields. So thank you very much for watching. Okay, thank you very much for watching, and subscribe. Hey, my spelling subscribe. I don't know. Okay, subscribe. So thank you very much for subscribing. I had problems spelling small. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching and subscribing. I really enjoyed the family. Thanks.